What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Frankie's Aquatics, right here on the wonderful, marvellous, magical platform that is YouTube. This week's video is going to be a little bit more in depth in regards to what I talked about on the back end of last week's video. So on the back end of last week's video I answered a few questions that I tend to get most commonly asked on my Instagram, through email, people that make contact through eBay, all those relevant platforms. These are the questions that people seem to crop up the most. So I thought to myself, why not do more of an in-depth video on each topic, and then hopefully try and compress the questions and help kind of give people a better understanding on how to challenge each topic at hand. First and foremost, I hope you've all had a really productive week. As always, Frankie's Aquatics has been moving along absolutely smoothly and having really good fun with it. So without further ado, this week's subject, or this week's topic, is going to be tank temperature, and more importantly, how to keep the tank temperature down. Now, axolotls, it's no secret, prefer cold water. The cooler the better. They can't hack too much of a high temperature. Technically, they can live in a more of a settled temperature and stuff, but basically you want to keep it as low as you possibly can. Now, the questions I get asked quite most is, how do I keep the temperature down? I live in a hot country. I've had people from America, like Florida, all these hotter climates that struggle like anything to keep the temperature down. Now, how do I do it successfully? So today's video is going to be, hopefully, a helpful guide of how you can keep your tank temperature down in your Axolotl Aquarium. Yosh. Axolotl Aquarium. So the first thing you can do is you can obviously go down the expensive avenue of buying an aquarium chiller. Now, if you happen to have a good couple of £100 laying about and nothing better to do with it, you can just go out and buy one of them, and it will absolutely bring your temperature down. Now, the cons to this, for me, the pros first and foremost is obviously they do work. As long as you're buying yourself a reasonably nice chiller, it shouldn't fail you and it should work just fine. Now, for me, the cons to these is two of them, maybe more, but the two that stick out straight away is first and foremost the price. They do cost an absolute fortune for what they're really doing. I guess they're technically like a mini refrigerator. I'm doing a wibbly wobble Jonathan Wass. They're technically a refrigerator, shall we say. So basically what it does is it takes the water, feeds into the chiller, cools down, and then gets pumped straight back into the aquarium. So it's a fairly easy setup, but unfortunately, because they're quite a bit of technical kit, they are quite expensive still. So that's the first thing really that turns a lot of people off on those. And the second thing, well, there's three things. So the second thing is they're quite loud, they're quite noisy. Now, you can probably hear in the background in my videos as of late, there's quite a lot of noise because I run all of my tanks now, including my bettas, and obviously all my axolotls are run off sponge filters, which requires an air pump to kind of kick the whole system up. Now, I do this because it's easier, first and foremost, more cost effective, but you do have to kind of contend with that noise in the background. So if you listen, that but believe it or not, you kind of switch off to it. It's a bit like having a ticking clock. I remember when I was a kid, we had this really old-fashioned, like, we used to call it Big Ben, this old-fashioned wall clock in my parents' home, and it used to go with a big pendulum at the bottom of it, and at the time it was like, oh, that's a bit much. And after about a week I kind of got used to it, and then when it finally broke, years and years later, probably 15 years later, it was kind of weird not hearing it. So it's the same with, for me, it's the same with the air pumps, because this is my blue room, it's my bedroom, this is where all my aquatics are kept, minus the fancy goals which are downstairs. You do get used to it. So yeah, I run all them off that anyway, but they do make quite a lot of noise, do these chillers. It's like almost like a grinding noise. It's the best way I can describe it. It's much more of an amplified hum, and then some of them kind of make like a swishing noise too. So it's enough to put a lot of people off, including myself, along with the price. And the third thing is they're quite big and bulky. They're of a reasonable size, so they're almost like mini refrigerators. I nearly said it wrong again. So they're almost like mini refrigerators. They do come in various shapes and sizes, but they are of a substantial size, so you've got to kind of make that kind of sit next to your aquarium and kind of look pretty and not look like it stood out of place, like me on Valentine's Day when I was a child. I stood there by myself and all my friends had dates, and I was just kind of like, don't mind me. I do that thing what you do when you're kissing somebody. So yeah, they do look a little bit out of place, and I've not really seen, apart from at pet stores where you go, I've not really seen a chiller that kind of doesn't look out of place. I mean, if you've got it on a nice fancy stand and you've just got the one tank, I suppose you can put it underneath like you would a sump filter. But apart from that, it's going to kind of stand out like a bit of a sore thumb. So you ought to contend with that as well. So that's my pros and cons when it comes to the chiller. The second thing you can do is you can buy aquarium fans. Now, I have actually got one of these. This is the one I actually happen to have. It's of a reasonable size. It looks like it's going to do the part. But there's a few things that I don't like about these. The first things, they do sort of work. Sort of. They're a bit the best way I can describe it, they're a bit here or there. And the first thing is, I had terrible trouble in getting one arriving to me that wasn't broke. I ordered mine from Amazon, and every time it came, it was either the plug that was broke, or the neck of the fan was broke, or it was just making like a drilling noise, like a dentist drill, like zzz, when it was on. I was like, that can't be right. And it took me literally, not even exaggerating, it took me about 7 attempts to get one from this particular company. He did it. It was him. It took me about 7 attempts to get one from this company that wasn't broken. We finally got there in the end. I ended up getting 2. And they did work, but it seemed to be very short-lived. It didn't make a huge difference to the temperature of the tank. It maybe dropped it by a few. And it was just, again, the noise came back. They were quite noisy. You have to be very careful because although they're right near an aquarium, I can only assume they're not kind of splash-proof and waterproof, obviously, so they can be quite tricky to fix to your tank. I mean, the one I had kind of clamped onto the back of the glass, but I like to keep a lid on mine because axolotls do jump. A lot of people say you don't need a lid. You don't need a lid for it. You kind of do, because if your axolotl is a bit adventurous, they do on occasion surprise you and try and jump. And even if that's nothing to do with the waters being off, that's just what axolotls like to do. They're fast swimmers. They get a little bit carried away. They kind of swim along. They get to the corner of the tank and then they go up, and they can and will jump out of the tank. It's very rare, but it does happen. So taking the lid off my aquarium was not an option for me either. So I ended up making a bracket for mine. So I had like about 15 centimeters rise from where the tank was to the lid, and then I attached the aquarium fan on the back of that. Now I noticed it didn't do a great deal of dropping the temperature very much. It was quite noisy. It wasn't really cost effective because it was constantly on. And yeah, it didn't really make much of a difference. The other thing you can obviously do is include ice packs. So you can freeze those sandwich picnic ice packs that you get that you pop in your lunchbox and stuff for your kids and take away on a picnic. They do kind of work, but I tend to find they melt very quickly, especially when it's really hot. So you'll just be forever taking the old ones out and putting new ones in and refreezing them, popping them back in. It's going to become a juggling act, and it's going to be something you're going to find really tedious. You're not going to enjoy it, and realistically you need to enjoy this hobby, otherwise it becomes very boring very fast. So again, short-term fix, maybe they'll work great for you, but long-term fix, not really. If it's a constant thing that you live in a hot climate, they're not really going to do what you need them to do. Now, this is what I do. So I live in the UK, and I'm very fortunate that over here it doesn't get very hot very often, and if it does, usually it's quite short-lived. So I tend to do this method. I currently live in a property that I'm on the end of the building, so my bedroom is like this, let's say, and I'm fortunate enough to have a window there and a window there. So I can open both windows on both sides of my building, and I can get a really nice circulation of air flowing through this room. It is constantly kind of cold. The wife complains that it's cold up here all the time, and she moans and tells me off for having the windows open, but I can get a lovely amount of air flowing through this room perfectly. And I tend to find that works enough to keep my tanks down, even when it's really hot. But when it's ridiculously hot, this is what I tend to do. So first and foremost, you're going to keep your tanks as low as you possibly can, because heat essentially rises. And as heat rises, you're going to obviously encounter the higher your tank, the higher the temperature. And that's when you're going to encounter your problems. So I tend to keep my axolotls lower on the aquarium rack. So it's 2 shelves of axolotls, and I've got my community tank at the top. Well, second to top, that's technically the top. That's just used for storage right now. So as you can tell, I've had a slight change of tank decor. Everything that was in there is still in there. I've just rearranged it, and I don't know about you guys if you've got happen to own an axolotl, but my guys, especially the big guys, don't like change. They get very cautious of it. I'll have curled gills for a little while. Flick's quite chill. he kind of goes with the flow, to be fair. That's Daddy over there. He does okay with it, but it's Mummy, which is currently exploring. So basically, rather than having a hide there and a hide there, and then the glass jar in the middle, I've decided to kind of gather it all into one corner. So we have the big axolotl hide there, which suddenly they don't seem to like anymore, which is a little bit frustrating because it was a pretty penny to buy. Then I don't know if you can see, but we have the glass jar at the top, which is angled slightly different, and then obviously with the Exoterra hide, which is there. I ideally want to get rid of that, but they seem to love it, so I just don't really have the heart to take it off them. And then obviously I've draped some fake leaves over the top. So yeah, there we go. I think it looks lovely. So this is the tank from a distance, look. If I can scroll back a little bit, that's the tank from a distance. I think it looks great. I really do. I'm happy with it. I just hope that these little guys take to it. Because essentially what I want to do is, where they are now, I want this to be the feeding corner. Because at the moment I tend to just kind of go in and feed wherever they might be. Whereas ideally I'd like them to associate this side of the tank. As when Pixel was a tiny baby, I used to feed her out of a dish, a feeding dish in the corner. So I wanted to kind of get in the habit again of associating a corner, or at least a side of the tank that is going to be known as the feeding side. So that's kind of the plan of action here anyway. I absolutely adore this lady, more than she'll ever realise, to be fair. She is absolutely means the world to me, as all my axolotls do, but Pixel in particular has a very special place in my heart. So hopefully Mummy over here will kind of get used to the idea of feeding on one side of the tank rather than me looking for her and coming to her. She's going to have to start pulling her weight a little bit, and she's going to have to start finding me again. And then hopefully she will take, in time, back to the jungle corner, as we'll call it. So yeah, that's what I'm hoping for anyway. What do you say, Pixel? Do you agree? And then the smaller juvenile tank, I haven't really done much with this. I still have the air filter over here, and then I have the leaves and stuff over here again with the Exoterra hide. As you can see, Flixel has kind of jammed himself between the glass of the back of the tank and the glass jar, completely defeating the purpose of the jar. And then we have Buddy up here, who's just enjoying life and just swimming about. The markings on him is pretty impressive. I hope he doesn't lose them as he gets older, because he looks very much like a Dalmatian right now. He's quite the pretty wild, and I can't help but admire him. He's quite the beauty. So yeah, it's very much the same. I haven't really changed much in this tank, to be honest, apart from kind of just lower the leaves a little bit, so they're a little bit more gathered at the bottom, because I did tend to notice that Flixel at the back over here does like to rummage through the leaves, so I haven't changed too much. Now, going back to the temperature of tanks, obviously the lower you can keep your tank, the better. So this one is at the very bottom. This is the biggest tank, and this stays at the very bottom. Temperature stays lovely within range of what I need it to be. And then obviously one up from that is my next axolotls. One up from that is the community tank. Now, in time, this whole rack will be an axolotl rack. And I don't know if you can hear in the background, but Phoebe is politely serenading us on the toilet. Listen. I have no idea what she's singing, but it sounds a little bit demonic. But she's giving it her best shot anyway. So yeah, eventually this whole rack will be an axolotl rack. Even that top shelf right the way up there. Out, Grumpy? So yeah, that's the plan of action anyway. So the lower the tank, the lower the temperature. give her a little time when she settles in, look. I'm so happy to see her using this, because she went mad for it when I very first popped it in there. They kind of had a bit of a squabble, and obviously Pixel, being the big lady she is, she won. And they've never really used it since. They just kind of just hide behind it rather than inside of it. So it is really nice and refreshing to see Pixel actually making use of this hide, because it's a lovely hide. It's of great size, and it looks really nice in there too, so I didn't really want to take it out. Don't quite know what Flick's up to. He's just kind of doing his thing over here. But how cute. I'm so happy. I'm so happy to see you hiding. Your little cute face. Your little derpy smile. I love you. I love you. So the lower the tank, the lower the temperature. That is a given. That's something that people massively overlook, but that does work. Yes, it's not exactly ideal having my axolotls on the floor, but I do literally sit on the floor and socialise with them each and every day for at least an hour with every single tank individually. So that's one to obviously consider. The second part is massive water changes. Now, you don't want to go too crazy and rip all the water out and chuck all new water in and treat the water, because you're going to throw your axolotl off something crazy, especially if your tank is cycled as it should be. So what I tend to do is I kind of pour out 25 to 35% of the water each day, nice and gently, and then I top it up with nice cold fresh water. That way it kind of lasts throughout the whole day. The axolotls are happy, and I'm happy, and the temperature is good, and everybody, including everybody, that's me, the axolotls, and even him. What are you even doing here, mate? I don't even know you are. So everyone's happy, and that's kind of what I tend to find works best for me. Yes, it's quite a lot of work, especially when you keep more than one tank, but it does work an absolute charm. And this way you're guaranteed to have healthy, happy axolotls when it comes to the heat, and you're also going to find that your temperatures will balance out a lot better. Again, I can't stress this enough, don't take out too much of the water. So many people make their old school habit of washing everything down when they clean out their animals, and the fish tanks in particular, sorry. They pull all the water out, they scrub everything down, and then they'll pop it all back in. And yes, it looks lovely and pretty on the eye to us, but unfortunately, you're going to crash your cycle in your tank, and you're going to cause yourself all sorts of troubles moving forward. So always pull out a percentage of the water, and then top it up with fresh, cold water. And that is really how I do things. That's how I've been doing things now for a good few years. I've had no massive issues or errors with that. Obviously, it's a lot of work taking out the water and retopping it up, and make sure obviously you condition the water too. And that's really the best advice I can really give you. There is other tips and tricks, I'm sure, but these are the methods that I've trusted and I've chosen to use myself, so I can talk firsthand with experience. So I hope this has been some use for you today. Next week's video is going to be another tip that I can give on axolotl care. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for stopping by and checking out the video. Also, be sure to hit the like button, because it lets me know that you enjoy my content. Also, hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And also ding that little bell, because I like how it sounds. Every time you press the bell, I can hear it. It's like a dog with a dog whistle. My ears perkle. And I like looking around, sniffing the air. No, seriously, thank you all for the support. Your support means a lot. I love you all this much, which is an awful lot considering it's probably a foot long from sub. It's a big amount, this amount, big. And until next time, ta-ta for now. I need to stop this. I'm getting far too old for this bowing down nonsense. I'm just going to leave. I'm just going to go. Smelly cat, what are they feeding you?